Hello, everyone. It's my very great pleasure this morning to welcome all of you. Morning in Nigeria, I don't know what time it is everywhere in the world where you are, but it's my pleasure to welcome everyone this morning to this first part of a higher education web conference series that is focused on discussions around COVID-19 and higher education system in Africa. This morning we have in our collection of speakers very wonderful and very knowledgeable set of people who are in the thick of things in their various institutions to share with us what their experiences are in their own various institutions and in their own sectors of control within their institutions. I think it will make a lot of sense for us to understand and share in the experiences of other institutions across Africa, because we believe that Africa has a common issue. And if we share our issues and share the lessons from different parts of Africa, we will be better off for it. This webinar series is brought to you by the Center for Higher Education, Innovation and Development based in Nigeria in collaboration with BusinessDay Media Limited Nigeria and Universities South Africa, the umbrella body of universities in South Africa. And we are doing this together because we have a collective belief that Africa's higher institutions should be doing better than it is doing today. And COVID-19 has provided us with a lot of challenges, and it has also given us a springboard to look at new ways of doing things. And the new ways of doing things does not mean that we will ignore the old issues Africa have. It is just to understand that there are new issues added to the existing issues. To moderate this morning is someone who coordinates the happenings in the universities, within the universities in South Africa, who is the CEO of University South Africa, which is Professor Ahmed Bawa. So Professor Ahmed Bawa, over to you.
Thank you, Dinak, and good morning, everybody. It's really wonderful to have 182 participants, 183 now, participants on the webinar, and that's a fantastic turnout, it seems to me. And of course, you know, we're all working with these new technologies now, so it's really a wonderful opportunity for us to connect across the globe. More importantly, of course, I just want to kind of thank kind of the Center for Higher Education, Innovation and Development in Nigeria for bringing University South Africa into this fray, but also to thank BusinessDay for co-sponsoring this event. Yeah, we are facing extraordinary challenges with the outbreak of COVID-19, and universities have really been struck by kind of the huge uncertainties that have been unleashed by COVID-19. And I think it's completely appropriate that we should really begin to discuss both the short-term and the long-term kind of challenges of this pandemic. So we have a wonderful panel of a wonderful group of panelists to help us to start thinking about this. First of all, we have Professor Adam Habib, who's the Vice Chancellor and Principal of University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. We have Professor William Bazeyo, who's a Deputy Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at Makarere. And then we have Dr. Aziza Lozy, who's the Associate Provost for the Transformative Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. And then finally, we have Professor Mohammed Abdulkadir, who's the Secretary General of the Association of West African Universities. So a wonderful panel of a wonderful group of panelists. And what I've asked them to do is to address two questions. The one is just what are the short-term impacts on our universities? Just what crisis is unfolding at our universities? And then secondly, to kind of really look at the longer-term impacts of the coronavirus outbreak. What are the longer-term issues that we face? And I've asked each of them to look at these questions from their own areas of influence, if you like. And they'll have 10 minutes each. And during this 10 minutes, hopefully we'll begin to get a set of questions. You'll see at the bottom of the screen that there's a Q&A tab. And if you have any questions, please put them on there. And then we'll kind of share those with the panelists as we go along. So 10 minutes each, and then we'll go into discussion. And then after that, right at the very end, we'll give the panelists 2 minutes each to kind of complete the session. And Mr. Odinaka Ilo, then from CEI ED, will kind of really round off the program. Unfortunately, I can be on the program just for an hour. So Dr. Linda Meyer, also from University South Africa, will take over once I'm out of the program. With that, we now have 220 participants, which is just amazing. And with that, I just want to kind of welcome all of you and really just kick off with Professor Habib to kind of take us through his kind of input, if you like. And I've got my cell phone here, so I'm going to get the clock going, 10 minutes each, and just to make sure that we all have some time to ensure that we are, we have some time for discussion. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Ahmed. Ahmed, it's really lovely being here to everybody. It's a lovely opportunity, and it's fantastic that so many people are participating in this webinar. I'll kick off quickly by saying that the COVID-19 response by the South African government was very immediate and very dramatic. So what we went to is quite a stringent lockdown quite early in the process. And what that did is effectively it required of us to evacuate our campuses, and it brought a standstill to all teaching and quite a significant amount of research. That was the real challenge that emerged. And the university very quickly, both at the sectoral level in engagements with people like Ahmed and other institutions, but also on its own, responded in three significant ways. The first, on the research front, we did quite a bit of research in three areas. One, drug therapies and vaccines. Some of it is part of the World Health Organization clinical trials, but there's quite a bit of work being done there. The second is data analytics. We have a series of data specialists who've been tracking the pandemic and looking at its evolution and informing government on policy. And third, quite a bit of work on economic policy and what are the implications. One of the most striking things in recent weeks, by the way, is our infectious disease specialists and our economists have been talking to each other and writing and co-authoring pieces, which is quite nice. So that's the first big effect. The second is service. We began to provide a number of services for the broader community, largely around PPEs. So disinfectants we've been producing screens, we've been producing masks, and we've partnered one of the NGOs to do testing. And so we do quite a bit of testing on the university premises. And then third was a significant attempt to address online. It's not really online, to be honest. It's really emergency remote learning. It's trying to take the learning process that we had focused on and try to adapt it so that it can be an emergency remote learning in an online format. But as soon as we began to confront that, we began to have to deal with the very, very deep inequalities in our society. Large numbers of our people, of our students, just do not have access. Our estimate at WITS was there's about 15% of our students do not have access to a device, anything between 3,500 and 5,000 people. And Ahmed will tell you that those numbers are much larger in other institutions in the country. And so the big question was how to address that. Initially, we tried to work with the TV stations, but that didn't work out because they were giving us time between 12 o'clock in the night and 6 in the morning, and that just wouldn't work out in a realistic way. So what we then did is to actually deal with the problem of the inequality, and we established what is a computer loan facility. We purchased 5,000 computers, created a loan facility and loaned it to all of the students that didn't have it. And we partnered with the South African Postal Service to deliver this within 48 hours. Second, we negotiated with all of the telcos 30 gigabytes of data for the first month, which we paid for, so it was free on effectively the students. And then effectively, the third thing we've done is we still recognize that people who are living in shanty towns in 5 or 10 to a room would still not be able to learn. And for them, we've created that when we return, if you like, a new face-to-face learning program on a restructured academic calendar. So effectively, we're working on two fronts. We're working in an emergency remote learning on the online format, and then we're working on effectively, we will be working on a face-to-face format and a restructured academic calendar when we come to a situation when the students can return. We'll have boot camps, we'll have classes, we'll cancel our holidays, we'll probably run into the new academic year, and those are the kinds of things we've done. Now, in a lot of ways, some of what we've done is typical to what exists in many parts of Western Europe, the United States, and Asia. In another way, what we've done is very different, because we've had to, in a very real sense, confront inequality. And we've had to, if you like, find quick solutions to those challenges. Is it perfect? No, it's not. And there's still a debate in our society about whether we should have gone online learning. A number of student leaders, for instance, and some academics said we shouldn't have done online learning. Our argument, to be honest, was that social justice does not mean we go to the lowest common denominator of options, that what we in effect should be doing is assisting those. We should be aware of inequality, we should be aware of its impact, and we should then try to mitigate its consequences and lend a helping hand to those that require it. And so in a sense, that was what the computer loan facility, the 30 gigabytes of data, and the face-to-face learning on a restructured academic calendar is about. Finally, what does this mean for going forward? Well, I think in many ways, this is going to be a challenge. We do know that most infectious disease specialists are saying to us, this is not going to be a 6-month phenomenon. This is going to live with us for 2 to 3 years. And in that process, we're going to have to confront the reality of possible pandemic outbreaks on our campuses, creating quarantine facilities, etc. More importantly, for a long period of time, we've been experimenting on various mechanisms of online learning. What this has done is accelerated it to quite a significant extent. And I don't think we're going to what some people are suggesting, which is a replacement of online, of face-to-face learning with online learning. But what I do think we are going to go towards is some kind of blended learning operation. And I want to give one example of this and then probably shut up. And that is, one of the big challenges we've all confronted for many years is huge classes in our universities. And the big question that is emerging is whether we should be now thinking, given the fact that we've made on online, on emergency remote learning, whether we should be thinking of shifting those huge classes online and transforming the face-to-face experience, if you like, in an applied format with group learning, tutorials, and the like. In that way, we could create a much more blended learning experience. And so I think that there's clearly challenges of this pandemic that's going to live with us for a couple of years. But as importantly, I think it's created and forced us to very quickly innovate on alternative teaching platforms. And I think that that's going to push us to a blended learning format that is important for us to have a more broader and substantive debate on. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. And that's an excellent kind of start, I think. Let's move on now to Professor Bazeyo, William Bazeyo from Makarere University. Professor Bazeyo, please unmute and then let's start.
Thank you. And I want to thank Professor Habib, because what he said is essentially what is affecting most of our universities. Uganda is no different. I'd like to welcome all the participants, the listeners, and I hope that we shall also learn from many of them. But I want to say one thing. When this disease came, it found us, it caught us unawares. It gave us no warning in Africa because our institutions were not prepared. I'll ask for my second slide. If you can note my second slide. So it is an epidemic that is not about to end. It has come and is going to be here for quite a long time until the cure is found or the vaccine. Now, unless the two are found, then whatever the higher education institutions are planning and the ministries and the governments, this will all be long term, because it will be for a very, very long time. And I want to say that no single country will eliminate this disease completely unless these two are there. And education is one of the sectors that has been hit most. And I believe that unless, next slide, unless we, the education sector addresses this, then, there you are. Unless the education sector addresses this problem, all the other sectors will be affected, because the backbone of the economy, the backbone of the private sector, the backbone of everything, it lies with our institutions. So the effects will be on the students, the faculty, the parents, the infrastructure, the private sector, and so on. So what did Uganda do? What did Makarere do? We are a university that is championing ourselves to become a research-led university. And as such, we swung quickly to research. And the first research that we commissioned was to characterize the virus that was coming to Uganda, because just to let you know that nearly all the cases that we have had in Uganda are imported. So we wanted to know, since they were coming from Asia, Europe, and so on, was it the same virus? And this study is going on, and I don't want to preempt. There is a publication that is coming out this week that will tell the world where Uganda is and what the virus is and how we have been managing it. The second thing, because we have a strong medical school, we put our consultants and our colleagues to start managing the cases that came in the country. Treatment was managed, and we put together the Lung Institute that is in Makarere University with the specialists to work on this. But also another group of scientists started working on the rapid test, given that the test that is available on the market is expensive, it takes a long time. So our team is working on a rapid test, which they have tested now, and soon we shall roll it out, where we'll be able to get the results within less than an hour, and it will be cheap and affordable. Our team also in the university, the College of Health Sciences, worked on the production of sanitizers with the private sector, which is still going on. But then we said it also affects the communities, this disease. So why don't we study the socio-economic impact? The socio-economic impact of COVID in Uganda is being studied, and the government is participating, all ministries, Ministry of Finance and Public Service, they are participating, and soon we shall have the report. We also commissioned a study on the psychosocial impact on the communities in Uganda, given that this disease, when it came, the patients or those who are screened positive, the stigma became so high. It was higher than even what it was for HIV when we had HIV very badly at the time in the 1980s. We have also done mathematical modeling, and in this mathematical modeling, we have our colleagues in the National Task Force. Remember, and I must say that I should have said, Makarere University contributed a number of specialists to the National Task Force to advise government, Ministry of Health, day to day on what to do. The other thing that we've done as a university is to look at how do we manage students, because we closed the university, all public universities closed, all private universities closed, schools closed. So we have several options. If you are looking at that screen, there are several methods that we can offer learning to our students. But that now in Makarere, because we were not very prepared, we didn't move straight to online teaching like many universities have done. We have now been meeting and have put a COVID response task force in Makarere University that has now planned on how do we manage students and the delivery of materials to them and teaching and examination without having the large classes like my friend Adam said, because we have classes which are really huge and the many universities do. So we have worked on negotiation with the providers. We have now got, some of them have given us free and others have given us reduced rates for internet. We are working on obtaining computers cheap from the providers, cheap for every student to have a computer. Makarere University has approximately 45,000 students. So we are looking at every student getting a computer. But what we are doing is not only for Makarere, we are also advising other universities, and whatever we are doing to negotiate, we are negotiating on behalf of students in the higher education sector in the country, both public and private. So that if, for example, MTN gives us a subsidy, it's not a subsidy for you, for Makarere, but we roll it over to others so that we cover the health, the education sector. We are also planning other measures for those people who will come back that are not online or who are coming for face-to-face. We have large numbers. We must know their status every day. So we must have the automatic temperature monitors as they enter. We must sanitize people, and people will use classrooms and the lecture rooms. We shall have lag time for us to be able to disinfect them. So all this is in plan, and we are working on the budget for them. But if you look at the methods that are there, as Adam said, I think the best method is the blended one, because this will cater for the scientists and those programs that need face-to-face, like the medical, where you must have people coming to be with the patients, clinical examination, and so on. So that is very important. We are looking at the blended type. Later on, of course, we will look at expanding the online learning so that we are able to admit many more people than we have been admitting because of limited infrastructure.
So, Bazeyo, could I ask you to round up, please?
Just 1 minute. The last one is that because of large numbers, we have planned that for first phase, we will have education offered in tents. We are putting tents and we're advising other universities to have large tents so that we'll be able to train our people in those tents. I'll come back at the end with the last slide, which has the recommendations, which I ask that you can put on for the members or for the participants to look at. Thank you very much. Those are my recommendations for management.
Thank you so much, Professor Bazeyo. It's very interesting, and thank you so much. Lots of detail there. There are now 278 participants. It's like a mass meeting, which is fantastic. So just to say that for colleagues, please have a look at for the panelists at least, there are some questions already in the Q&A section. Please have a look at them. The first one is really for Odinaka, which is, will the recording of the session be distributed to everybody? And then there are some other questions there. So please have a look at them and we'll come back to them. Now I'm going to go on to the next input. The next input will be by Dr. Aziza Lozy from the American University in Cairo. And I'm going to turn over to her now. Welcome, Professor Lozy, and over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting our university to do the presentation. As we said, that we're going to be talking about our own perspective. And the perspective I have is a little bit different than yours because it's really focused on the university. That was my mandate, is to take, to be in charge of in general, the quality of education in any approach. So I'm bringing that experience and sharing with you what we've learned, and hopefully it would get something, we can talk about it. There are many things that are in common and other things that are not. So let me, I don't know, it's until the slides come, just give you a little bit of background. Our university is a private university. It is it's an American Egyptian university, but it adopts the liberal arts, teaching methodology of American universities. And at the same time, we have professional schools like business, engineering, etc. We do not have a medical school. So as an American, as a private university, we could not close before the government decides to close. So the public schools, the public universities started quite, relatively late. We closed lockdown quite late, I think. But at the same time, the provost had a vision. He called me once and he said, it's not if the virus is going to come to Egypt, it is when. So we need a contingency plan and we need to prepare for it. The other thing that worked in our favor is that about 17 years ago, we established something called the Center for Learning and Teaching. And that center is really focused on faculty development, but it is also voluntary. So faculty over the years acquired let's say, some expertise, not all of them, but some of them, some expertise in teaching in a more innovative way and in using technology in an more innovative way. But again, it was, you have the whole spectrum, those that are absolutely not interested to those that are more innovative. So many of our faculty were not prepared we knew they would not be prepared. So part of the preemptive measure was to prepare a training program, if you want. I don't like the word training, okay? But a program that would, for any faculty that were interested in coming and being prepared for the eventual closure, they would come. So it ran for about 12 days from morning to night, and we had different sections with focusing on what we thought was important to go online if they've never done it before. And of course, there were some that did it. So within those 12 days, we were able to have and talk to about 564 faculty out of the total of about 750. So, and many of those that didn't come were ready. So in essence, I think we were more prepared than the average. And yet with that, we had challenges. So I'm just giving you the background of that. So what we did, once we decided to go online immediately, we decided that for the first 4 weeks of online, we're going to monitor and survey students and faculty every single day. And we would have a report at the end of every week, especially the first week. We would look so that if there's anything that is coming out that needs to be addressed or intervened, we would do that. So we did that. And I have I'm sorry you don't see the slides, but typically we had especially the first week, we had about 8,000 feedback from students and from faculty. And with students, it's interesting, but their feedback or their challenges were very much what was happening all over. Number one, the quality of the education, as well as the interactivity that was missing, the communication, and of course, for some of them, we had the connectivity problem, to which we immediately did what Dr. Professor Adam was saying. We provided those that were in need with computers and with internet bandwidth. The other thing is the increased workloads. Faculty do not realize that going online does not mean replicating what is happening face-to-face. That students, under these circumstances, they had to readjust both their deliveries and the thing. Anyway, we got this feedback, and so we did the intervention. Now, the main lesson, if I have to say one main lesson that was noted, is that if you're going to go online, even if it's blended and it's not face-to-face, the design of the course is very different. And that is where the challenge comes in. So you need support for faculty to help out the design. And this is what is happening. So what we're doing, we're at that stage now where we have collected all our data to see what it is. We have designed and again, you don't have it over here, but we've designed a module for faculty that is self-learned, and they have a day and night support if they really want to tweak on what they're going to be, what they need to do. And what the module does, it helps them design what an online course could be. Doesn't mean that it's going to be 100% online. That's not it. And I agree with Dr. Habib that what we are doing was really emergency remote instruction. So we have to keep in mind that it takes time to become fluent into doing that properly. And so so right now we're preparing for the summer. We're preparing for the summer, and we know who the faculty that are teaching in the summer. We know we encourage them to come to the center, and we encourage them to look at that thing, and they're doing it in order to prepare the syllabi, because the summer also is more challenging because they're meeting in a shorter period of time. And based on the results, or based on our experience in that period, we're going to prepare for the fall. Now, the fall right now, there's a task force working on the same thing as what you are doing, is that what are the scenarios they're going to do? The scenarios fully face-to-face, probably not going to happen. But we have to choose, which are the courses that come online, which are how are the social distancing going to happen, what kind of support faculty need and students need for going online, for those that are going online. And then, I mean, I can go on talking about that quite a bit, and I'll wait for the answers because I don't want to. Maybe we can switch to the next slide, please, Brian. And once we prepare, at the same time as this, is to look at the future. What do we need? What is going to happen? We had this crisis, similar crisis, when we had H1N1, when we had the closure of the revolution, and when we had another, I think it was another disease, I can't remember what it was, maybe SARS. So the 3 times we went through the same thing: closed down, faculty, panicking, going online for a while, or doing blended and so on. The difference was that they could meet outside the campus with their students and still have a face-to-face component. This was very different. But once we came back to norm, things, when we went back to our old habits. So this time, I don't think it's going to, it should not happen that way. I mean, the paradigm is going to be there. We should be prepared for probably a kind of blended learning modality in general, and prepare our students, number one, for digital fluency and digital literacy, because they're going to be working in a very different environment. And if they don't know how to work and collaborate digitally with other cultures, with other people, then we are really at a disadvantage. Now, how do we translate what we're doing to the public universities? Because that's where they need. And that's where there is a collaboration and a discussion going on. How do we translate our experience, which is really quite different from the public universities, because even though we have right now big financial problems, we're still much better off than the public thing. So the thing is to share these educational materials that we are developing, to translate them into Arabic, and to share their experiences of faculty development, because that is, if the faculty is not ready or willing to fit in this new paradigm, we're not going to go anywhere. So that's my focus has been mainly on our experience, which is really a little bit narrower than what my previous speakers have done, because they are looking at more on a country basis. But essentially, I think the problems are the same. We have to address inequities. We have to address we're going to have students learn in a different way. We're going to have to produce. I don't want to say produce. We're going to have to have learners that can function well in a society, in a global society that is a little different than what we have been so far. So these are our responsibilities, and they are huge, and they're not small. So that's in a nutshell what I have to say. I hope I stuck to my time.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lozy, and that's excellent input as well. So we now have 291 participants. That's fantastic. Now, if you look at the Q&A tab, you'll see that there's a number of questions already there. And I've asked the panelists, please, just to go through them. Some of the issues that I've kind of picked up, if you like, how are we to deal with students with disabilities? That's a really critical issue, it seems to me. The second is the issue around spatial planning, and just what are the implications for social planning. The third one was the issue of national negotiations for devices, data, and so on. There's some of that going on in South Africa, and the likelihood is that will become the norm over the next period of time. An interesting question about work-integrated learning and how to deal with that. I think that's going to be a real challenge, I think, as the economy has shut down mostly. And I suppose the answer to that question will be, that we'll have to work with the economy as the economy opens up again. And then a really interesting question on blended learning, and the fact that blended learning, might actually kind of change the student experience, if you like, in terms of all the other kind of experiences of students on our campuses and so on. And then finally, just the issue around the labor market, and will students who have kind of graduated this year, will they have difficulty getting into the labor market? So there's a whole range of questions, and our panelists will pick them up as we go along. So can I just suggest that as you pick up questions, as you have questions, please just kind of really have them put onto the Q&A. There are already 25 of them, but there's some duplication. So, so I'm going to start off with Professor Habib again, just to ask him if he wants to take up some of those questions.
There was an interesting question around spatial implications of going on to blended learning. And I think that is something that we do need a debate on. For many years, a number of universities on this continent have been thinking about building huge lecture rooms for 600-700 students. And I think that this blended learning process opens up big questions around whether we should be doing that, or whether we should be shifting big classes online, whether we should be providing computer laboratories or enabling students to have laptops, and then you don't spend that much money on actually the kinds of desktops in computer laboratories, etc. I do want to say that blended learning is not online learning completely. It isn't about closing down face-to-face interactions of students. As many people have said here, universities are much more about simply the narrow learning. It's about acculturation experiences, sporting experiences, creating networks, creating all of those face-to-face interactions. And really what we're looking at in blended learning is a movement between online and then face-to-face experiences in a big way. And I think that that's something that we need to look at. Ahmed's answered the question on work integrated learning. I think what we're doing in that regard is under different academic calendars. We're doing a lot of the theory stuff, and we're going to do a kind of accelerated laboratory work integrated learning process at a different point in the year. And then two quick things that I do want to touch on is students with disabilities, I think, is an important question. And frankly, we have not done enough. And we need to spend far more time in providing support in that. We're doing it on a case-to-case basis. And I think we need to do far more. And then Ahmed will say to you that the telecoms are interesting in the debate. I wish I could say, were they forthcoming? Yes, they were. Did it mean they gave up their focus on profits? No, they didn't. And I think that the real debate is how do we get them in between, a balance struck between what is legitimate profits and how do you act in the social purpose. And I can't imagine that being done without government at least insisting on establishing certain parameters. Finally, there's quite a bit of work being done, online work being done with students and with academics, online orientation, enabling them to learn experiences, all kinds of training programs that have been accompanying this emergency remote learning as we've done. But I do think partnerships is something we should talk about. Can we work together? Can we lend where we have more capacity? Can we allow other students to access it from other institutions, etc.? There, I think we're doing too little. And webinars like this are useful in that regard.
Thank you so much, Adam. Let me ask Professor Bazeyo now to come in. Are there any questions you'd like to raise? There's a question about the use of tents, which you might have seen there, it sounds like a really interesting idea. But over to you here.
I talked about tents, and we have two types of tents. There's one that we did that I didn't mention that we are using for isolation of patients. That's not the tent I'm talking about. That one is medical, and it is used in emergencies, and we are going to use a lot of that in our Ministry of Health. But the tents I'm talking about, if we are going to have social distancing, we are going to have these classes in open area, but not under trees, but under the tents. And I wish they can put on my last slide because it has most of the answers of the questions that I saw on the chat. I have answered some, but I wanted to talk about disabilities. Disabilities, this is something that is very challenging. We have discussed it in our committee in the COVID response task force. How do we support the disabled people? We are trying to work around how can they keep in higher education with support with these changes. This is something that we haven't got a solution yet, but we are working on it because it has been in our discussion. The second question was on labor market. I'm sorry to say that we are going to have a big problem because the labor market, this is the economy where our graduates have been going. I don't want to be like a prophet of doom, but even the employment will actually be limited. But I do not think or even believe that the graduates that we produce out of this training will be any different from the other graduates because we have run some of these courses before. I wanted to say something about the telecoms. We have interfaced with some of them. Some of them are forthcoming. Others are saying we are in business. So we are now going the different way. How can government support us? Government, of course, will not pay all the bandwidth and so on. We are saying we should have a government or a policy that the telecoms support this education. And we think that we will lobby enough to have supporters in the policy making in the parliaments to make sure that these become part and parcel, not only making money. Because if we just rely on negotiating with one by one, they will turn around and say, look, we have given enough. Lastly, I wanted to talk about partnerships. This is very important. We have students in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania studying in South Africa, and vice versa. So we believe that if institutions work together, our students, as like Habib said, can share materials that are actually in their countries, share campuses where possible. So I think this is the time to bring on board institutions of higher learning. How do we share materials? How do we work together? How do we support each other so that students don't have to move all over the place coming to study? I had requested my slide to come on, which had answers, but didn't come on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Bazeyo. Colleagues, I'm now dropping out, and Dr. Linda Mayer will take over as moderator. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lozy, if I may ask if you have any inputs on the questions that have been posed. Sorry, if I could just ask you to unmute, please.
Yes, of course, I do have input on a lot of them. I'm just trying to see if I can get a few of them together. For example, there's a question on assessments. I'd like to, or several questions on assessments, and integrity of the assessments. There's also, again, about the spatial implications, and that is something that we're working on. And it's not something that is very long term, I hope. Dr. Habib said about 3 years. Okay, so in the next 3 years, we do have to plan on what the spatial is. And it turns out that it's really, if this 1 meter by 1 meter is very limiting in terms of the number of students that you can put in single place. So that is something that we're working on, and I think it would mean either we can stream things within a big space, or then hire more faculty, but that's not something that we are probably going to go through. So let me take there is one question that was asked about the AUC in particular, about the American University in Cairo. They were asking me if this simply is teaching, or if you also have research and we have community-based learning. Of course we have research, and of course we have a very strong program in community-based learning and in services. I didn't touch this because that's not what I was working on. I was focusing most on what I do, because it is, it is more granular as work. So let's go to the question of assessment, and that was the biggest problem that we faced, because faculty are used to do things face-to-face. They used to have exams, more traditional exams. They proctor these exams. How are we going to do it otherwise? How are we going to assess? And the idea is that assessment in online learning in general is not done by proctoring. And so there are things that we try to give examples of alternative assessments. And a lot of faculty did buy into that. And they were giving other things. They had to, of course, put a lot of effort in restructuring how they ask questions, what they ask. And some of them were actually doing things on Zoom, very creative things. So I think the whole idea of moving away from that is we can do it. It takes somewhat of effort. And I'm going to repeat again that faculty, as well as students, need some kind of entity on campus that gives them the support. And that takes time into building and doing. The other thing, so the integrity again is something we're going to find out at the end of the semester. We have a very strong academic integrity program at university. There are cases that may happen, and the circumstances are very different than usual because students are very stressed. But we do know a lot of things that can guide faculty. For example, an antagonistic relationship doesn't help students, do end up by cheating, and there's a lot of ways of doing that. So that in itself, I can talk about it a little bit more, but that needs to be, it's something again that needs to be taken into account. And of course there are software that are quite expensive that monitor exams if you still want to do the exams. The other thing is, let's see, They talk about multifaceted types of facilitation. I'm assuming multifaceted types of different modalities of teaching, and how do you assess these different modalities? And again, that turns into what we call the alternative assessments. And I'm going to encourage anybody that is interested to look at the, and I'll give it to you at the end, the online resources that we have that have been developed that shares that with our faculty, and I think it's, you know, it's open for everybody and they can use it. So there are ideas in there, and some of them are easily implementable, and some of them maybe a little bit more. But there are there's a variety, a spectrum of things one could do away from the typical exam or the typical paper and so on. The more challenging thing is that we had is the graduate students doing the research, that especially those that have to come into the labs and do that. And that is something that we're going to have to be more flexible as we go into the fall semester and see how we're going to do that with social distancing. Finally, stop me if I'm going over my time, but finally, students with disabilities. And this is something that actually we're the only university in Egypt that is accepting students with disabilities of all kinds. And there is a support system for them, very elaborate, and faculty are being trained to address these things. Some of them, if they're not declared, it's very difficult to see things, some disabilities that are not obvious, like physical disabilities. The mental disabilities are more difficult to deal with, but they are still there and can be dealt with. So that in itself also needs attention. So all of these things is where you put your priorities on. And I think some of the comments here was that this is exactly what the government should do. I mean, education should be up there, and more budgeting should be put in education, so that you have a strong, network for one thing, a strong program for the faculty development, and a program for student support of what kind. But it is, of course, it is very expensive, and we have to make our choices. And sometimes we can think out of the box and not go the expensive way. It doesn't have to be that way. And then what else? What other question? Okay, how about the impact on the internationalization agenda? That's a big activities of the institutions. We are going to rely a lot on what we're doing right now. You know, maybe doing Zoom or doing Google Hangouts or whatever, because if they can't come, but at least you can come and have them, you can make them have, you know, courses, they can take courses, and they can interact with our students and they with them. It's a very important facet for today's world, because if you don't understand the other, then, you know, that's where we get problems. So that aspect of it is really quite important. And I think it's feasible. I think it's feasible like this, except that, again, we have to focus on designing the course in a manner that allows for that, so that you know, you don't have people finding that is, you know, it's not done up to par. So that's an important thing, yes. The other thing is that, you know, the dollars that come in by international students is something that is causing a big deficits in some universities, including our own. What else? The sharing of learning materials, absolutely. I agree, that is something that is extremely of value. It has been of value to our center, there's been of value to our university, to our faculty. There's so much out there that it's a shame that you have to reinvent the wheel. So if there has to be, in our case at least, is the question of translating some of this material into Arabic, because most of it is in English, and then it may not be the problem of my university, but it's still something that could be used. And I think and you know, not only sharing, but also contributing to these open educational resources. And that's the way to go. Do you want me to stop?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for those valuable insights. If I could ask Professor Abdulkadir if he has any other inputs that he would like to share from the questions. All right. I think then many of the questions have raised very interesting points, and I am going to ask participants, please, just to look at the end of the screen, and you'll see that there is a webinar poll. So as we continue, we would really appreciate that you take part in these webinar polls so that we can have these insights, because we will be sharing the presentations, and Mr. Adinaka will also be telling us how we can further access these materials. What I really want to focus on now, before we continue, because we don't have much time left, is really to ask Professor Habib to give us some further insights around social justice and the element that he has famously coined of the lowest common denominator that really has become part of our speak. Professor Habib?
So colleagues, two things. I should perhaps say there's a number of questions on learning and how we can share materials. And I've just posted that perhaps we can ask both USAF and the regional associations to talk to each other about how we could assist in this regard. I'd be happy to take direct requests and bits, but there might be a useful framework to do this, because I think this is something that we should do urgently and that can flow from this. On the social justice question, we've had a number of students, and frankly, some academics and even politicians, who, when the debate on online education emerged, took the position that said, everybody doesn't have full access to connectivity. And therefore, what we should be doing is we shouldn't be allowing online education. No universities should go online so long as everybody cannot be online. Some of us contested this notion of social justice. Our argument was social justice in this definition means we go to the lowest common denominator of the options. And the danger with that is that it would undermine the country. It would undermine and deepen inequalities and actually compromise national development. A more thoughtful approach to social justice is to recognize the inequality and then look at how we make attempts to address that. So the idea was, firstly, you must be aware, you can't say, well, people must just operate. What you have to be is conscious that there are challenges and see if you can assist in this regard. This is why we went to the computer loan facility. This is why we went to the negotiations around Telcos. This is why we created an alternative online platform of learning. This is why some institutions are actually posting to students within 48 hours lecture notes and hard material. So we're creating multiple modalities of learning precisely because we are aware of that. But social justice does not mean that because all of us are not equal, that means we shouldn't be doing anything. That's a really problematic approach to social justice. And that's something that we've begun to argue vociferously, if you like, in the South African context. It has created tensions, but what it has also done is created opportunities. So for instance, now government has agreed that 14 of the institutions with the least resources will be provided with government support so that they could be assisted to go online, that they would be assisted with multiple modalities. I do think this is a big debate, by the way, and I do think we must be frank and have the courage to engage in this debate, because sometimes the people who engage in this debate try to silence a thoughtful engagement in this regard. And I think it's something that we do need to have the courage to engage openly and transparently.
Thank you, Professor Habib. Dr. Lozy, you spoke quite vehemently about the issue about preparing academics and preparing students for this new way of learning, this blended integration. Do you possibly have some insights to share with other institutions how to prepare the ground?
All right, as I mentioned, we really started in principle this preparation a long time ago. recognizing that even with face-to-face, that the landscape of teaching and learning has changed. And so, there is a problem there that, it's difficult to tell faculty, come on, you need to undergo professional development. So it has to be, they have to be convinced that there is a need, and also their time is very precious. So they have to be convinced that they will be willing to put the time in this professional development. So I would say that you need to have some kind of entity that is fully that addresses that question, that this entity is sensitive to and responds to faculty needs in whatever context there is, whatever their own context is. Number three is that you have to be very patient. In other words, it takes time to build this thing. Now, I have to say that this pandemic has given that push it has given that recognition a big push. Now, all faculty, number one, they came running to see what can be done. And because they're also faced for at least maybe 2 or 3 semesters of maybe this kind of thing, that they will give the time. In addition, some of them, by going through it, they have found out what it is that they can actually use that is better for them. Even if they go to face-to-face, they would do things that are, we have something called the flipped classroom, in which you really spend time in the classroom doing things that are not simply lecturing, because the lecturing, they can do it online, and you come into class doing the more difficult thing because you're there helping the students to learn independently. So I'm saying that there have been a benefit, and I think it's not going to be very difficult now to convince people that they do have to have some kind of support, some kind of help, some kind of things. But to do that, you do need to have either on campus, either other faculty that are volunteering for that, to do that sort of thing, or you have a centralized unit that the university really staffs with people that are expert at that. And then in itself, you can use other people, we use our students to help faculty to work one-on-one on technology. And students are wonderful. They learn and they're happy to meet, and faculty are happy because they're doing it on one-on-one basis. So there are many ideas floating around from other people's experiences that we ourselves picked up from and built according to our own needs. We adapted to our own needs. And that's what I would suggest. I don't think just leave it like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Lozy. Professor Bazeyo, you speak about us planning for the unknown future and looking to Africa insularly to look for our solutions as institutions. Could you maybe give us some more insights into how you see the new future, the new normal that will emerge after COVID-19 in looking and planning for this future of higher education?
Thank you very much. I want to agree with Habib and my sister Aziza on what they have said. The environment is going to be different. It is not going to be the same as before. As I've seen some people asking and saying, we need to reassure the students. As we are planning for the future, we should plan with the students. Students must be prepared for what we are planning so that we develop the skills and competencies before they become graduates. Now, with this pandemic, it has opened the eyes of many of us that it is now time to have African universities or Africa deliver to African youth and graduates that will actually answer the problems of this continent. It is the first time, I must say, that we have seen institutions not looking to the west or to the north or wherever, but looking to each other internally. The future has to be planned now. And I must say that in South Africa, as I hear, faculty are able to move and meet. In Uganda, schools and universities are still closed, so there is limited movement. One of the requests that we have put on the table that we are going to give to government is to allow university faculty to start moving or coming to the universities so that they can develop these alternative platforms, work on materials that we will prepare ourselves to share with our other institutions, and then later on address the students. One thing that we must know is that a lot is out there that can be shared, but we have never shared it. Or if we have, it has been limited. But it is now our time to actually share what is there. But faculty, I know, and I must quickly say, there are so many faculty in the different institutions that have been working individually on their partnerships. We need to bring those partnerships on the table so that universities know that we are working. For example, listening to Aziza, now I know that there are so many materials they may have in Arabic that all we need is to actually interpret them or translate them into English. And they also do the same. We now know through these webinars, if they continue, that we can plan even better. You see, together, if our challenge, as I see on the charts, the challenge of Uganda, the challenge of Rwanda, the challenge of Kenya is telecoms. What can we do together to plan for this future with these companies? How can our governments support us? How can they work in their economic blocks? East African Community, ECOWAS, SADC, how can we work with those blocks to cause change? We have the African Union. How does the African Union bring together African countries, not only politically, but to address the problem of higher education and the producing graduates that will run the economy, that will run this private sector and so on. So I believe the future is now in our hands, and I am very confident it won't slide out because COVID has shown us that together we have to move. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. We are nearing the end of the webinar, so we are going to speak to our panelists now and ask them please to give us the top 3 takeaways that they really have experienced during this COVID-19 period and the top 3 insights that they would like to share with us. Professor Habib, if we could start with you, please.
The first thing I would say is that I do think we have to start experimenting. I think we have to first realize that what we're doing is not online learning. What we're doing is emergency remote learning in an online format. It's not perfect. It's not designed for online learning. And I think that that's the first thing we need to realize. But I think it's worth entering the challenge, experimenting, beginning to understand and be cognizant of inequalities, and beginning to mitigate against it. That's the first thing, I think. The second, which some people have posed in the question and answering session, is how are we going to come back to a new sense of normality? I don't think we'll ever go back to what was normal before. But I think we are going to have to look at a kind of phased return. We've already started in South Africa with final year medical students. I think we are talking now about postgraduate students, those programs that require face-to-face engagement. We're talking about programs that require laboratories and clinical services and work integrated learning. So I think we're looking towards a phased return. But then I think in the long term, we are heading toward something called a blended learning. Some part of our learning process is going to be an online format. Other parts of it are going to be in the face-to-face format. And we need to understand the proportions, the balances, and how we navigate between the one and the other. And I think that that is what we should be experimenting on in the coming weeks, months, and years.
Thank you very much, Professor Habib. Dr. Lozy, if we could ask you for your top 3 insights, please.
I think in many ways they parallel those of Dr. Habib. I would say for that, definitely we're going to have to be preparing for a new paradigm. That paradigm will be phased because we don't have a choice. On several fronts, for example, that it will be phased because our faculty are not, not ready yet. My provost says, from this experience, I want the next semester to do real online. Well, sorry, it's not going to be real online. It will still be better maybe than our experience, but it is not. We have to. That happens by steps, and for that, we really have to prepare how to train or how to support faculty to go into one of many directions. They can still go face-to-face, but even the face-to-face has to be different. They can do blended, and I think that is probably one thing that we're finding, and it would be a modality maybe that fits many of the consequences of this financial problem. So that is another one. And of course, there will be always room for completely online programs and courses, because there is a demand for them. There are people that work and would rather do the online part. So that we have to cover the three, and if we cover the three, there have to be different preparations for each of the modality. The other thing that have the dealing with the inequalities, and that is extremely important, and that I have always a hard time to figure, and I agree we cannot go to the lowest denominator, but how do we provide for the biggest possible number of students in the biggest way? And from my experience as my own personal thing, I have found that the internet and what's in it and the richness of it, of course, if you filter a lot of the garbage, is the way to go. You can really learn online. I have learned all my latter, part of the world of my education has been online. So I'm saying that yes, that we have to focus on, the governments have to focus on getting strong infrastructure and try to reach as many people as possible. I know South Africa used to do it with telephones. I mean, that is, doesn't have to be too expensive, but let's put our efforts in there as much as possible so that we reach all the tiers. I think data-driven results is very important. We really have to, when you experiment, we need to evaluate what is what we're doing, how it's been, how can we tweak, how can we get better, and this is an iterative process that goes on and on. And finally, I think collaboration is the name of the game. I think in today's world, that if you don't share and collaborate with others, I think you lose. So it's not just. So I think yes, collaboration, and we can have consortia. We can have, we do that a lot with some other universities, and I think this is extremely important.
Thank you very much, Professor Bazeyo. If we could have your final 3 thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, my colleagues on the panel. I think we may be thinking the same because the problem is the same. But I would like to add that the first one, given that our faculty and students are all ill-prepared for e-learning or online teaching, we need to build that human capacity and empower it with what we said earlier. Create these platforms for the faculty to be able to plan, upload their materials and be able to teach, prepare the students, build that capacity in them by having them have access to computers, access to internet, affordable internet, so they're able to learn, to assure them that actually there will be exams and the mode of exams to be clearly planned, because if we don't do this, people will be able to challenge the different degrees or awards from different universities. So human capacity empowerment, both faculty and students. The second one is the policymakers. I think at this time, we need our policymakers, our governments, to stand with the education sector. I know there are budget constraints, But for us to transition from the way we've been moving, we need government's transition. Lastly, to me, one of the things that Habib talked about, and my friend, my colleague Aziza, blended learning. But before we do this, we need to prioritize which courses will go online and do not need face-to-face. Because when you talk about online teaching, people will ask you, what type of doctors are you going to have? What type of scientists? We need to prioritize and then say, how many of the courses or programs can be taught online, and how many of those can they come face-to-face? And when they come to do that, you also factor in, how do you examine them? Quality assurance, how do you know that the doctor you are producing now is as qualified with the quality that you expected? And to do that, to prioritize, we must work with all the stakeholders. Because if you are looking at internship, for example, the people, the consumers of the interns must know what you are doing and must know how you are training people. So all this, there's need for prioritization before we say online or blended learning. But above all that, all these things must be worked on in phases, not abrupt. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This has been a very insightful series, and I'm going to ask the speakers just to give their final thoughts, 30 seconds, before we do our wrap up and we hand over to Mr. Odinaka, who will then just consolidate the session. And we thank participants. So Professor Habib, your last thoughts, 30 seconds, please.
Sorry, I think we need more of this. That's my last thought. I think we're not speaking enough. I think we're not collaborating enough. And I think we can learn quite a bit from each other. And I'd like us to think through how we do this in a much more effective way on the continent so that we can begin to learn from each other's experiences.
Thank you very much, Professor Habib. Dr. Lozy?
Yeah, it's pretty much that. I think we need more collaboration. I think maybe we can, you know, there could be something that is like a, you know, either an actual website that we can, you know, get back and talk and continue discussion if it makes it easier, and then take it there and develop it a little bit more. But I do certain think we should have some kind of a medium in which we can share and collaborate with our ideas.
Thank you very much. Professor Bazeyo, any last thoughts?
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to say that my thoughts are, I wish this started a month or 2 months ago when COVID came. But nevertheless, this has been a very nice beginning, and I'd like to ask colleagues and those who are participants, how can we do this more regularly? Even put it in disciplines so that the different disciplines start talking to each other, to break the silos of the universities, break the silos of the institutions on this continent, silos of the different disciplines. How can we break this and start now and move to the future? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So just in closing, the important lessons for today before we hand over to Mr. Odinaka is around social justice, strong collaboration, surely making sure that quality assurance is prime in all the activities that we partake in, and also that Africa brings an African solution, that we don't always look to the north. We have esteemed academics, we have very capable people, so we look to our own future to solve our own problems. Thank you very much. Mr. Odinaka, if I could hand over to you just to do the final words, please.
Okay, I must thank everyone who has sacrificed an hour, 30 minutes to stay with us on this important issue, important discussions. And I also need to thank the panelists on a very short notice. They all showed up And I'm sure anybody who joined us here today will ever live to be happy with the content that is being shared here today. And I'm happy this has happened, and I'm happy that one of the resounding lessons we have learned today, and one of the things that has been emphasized the most, is the need for collaboration and partnership, which is one of the strong pillars of the Center for Higher Education, Innovation and Development. And will this kind of conversation and this kind of discussions continue? Yes, we will continue to make it possible as much as we can. In fact, tomorrow is another leg of the session, which will be looking at more about the leadership in the university environment and the government, how they are interacting to confront the issues that have been befalling us. I must thank you, the panelists, so specially for coming on board today. And I hope if we invite you next time, you will be able to make our time to join us in this conversation. And one other thing is that what COVID-19 has actually shown again to all of us is that some institutions are more prepared than others to deal with unexpected challenges of life. And sometimes when rankings are released, some people kick against it thinking that, oh, it does not tell the whole story. I agree that it doesn't tell the whole story, but rankings tell some of the stories. And it has shown clearly that the institutions who have responded better to the challenges of COVID are some of the institutions that are always ranked up there in Africa. And we thank you all for sharing with us. And we hope that those who have not signed up for tomorrow will sign up again, so that to go together, we will have to learn some new lessons tomorrow. And on this note, I thank you all, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.